It's Luke Williams with Civil Mesh.
Armando Gonzalez with Civil Mesh.
We're going to talk about some topo stuff today. And so I want to first start out with just talking about what's the real value of a topo and an aerial map. So nowadays, drones are very popular and everyone uses aerial data for things and the value. A lot of people see drone stuff and they think, what's the value? What's the value behind an aerial topography? What's often forgotten is what also comes with an aerial topography is an aerial image. You get a really crispy, super accurate image. You can zoom in and see rocks this size. I mean, you could measure the distance. You know, your ground sampling distance with a GSD, if I'm saying that right, with the drones that we have nowadays, extremely accurate. And so, the value of a topo. You get a topo, you get a contour map. You can do a lot of things with that. Here in the construction world, what we're going to be talking about today is the main thing that people are using topographies for is quantity verification. We could take a 3D model that we've built, take a 3D model that is built from a topo, because that's essentially what you're doing with the topo, is creating a DTM, the same thing that's used on a machine control model. You'll take that, you'll compare the two, and that is the best value, the biggest value that you get out of a topo is the foundational data of a project. It enables good record keeping. It's a good slate for when you start a project. What was it before you started? So a lot of things can happen on a project. A lot of litigation could happen, a lot of lawsuits or whatever. But if you have a topo, you have what was there before you started the job. So without a good topo, I don't know how you can compete in today's time with peace and clarity and knowing just what the site consists of before you get out to the site. So the main value of it is the data. Knowledge, data is value, is power. So why does a topo pay for more than itself? I'll give you a perfect example. On a job that says that there's, let's say, 100,000 yards on the job. Usually the engineer will do a 50-50 grid or a 100-100 grid, and you have a base topo that was used for planning and creating the plans, submittals and such. But when you go start the site, what about everything that happens in between that 100-foot space? You technically don't have an accurate topo to calculate. So they got 100,000 yards. We go do a topo, drone topo, and we see that the site ends up being 150,000 yards. There's 50,000 yards there that is not accounted for. And back in the day, before you had drone topos or even just topos in general, people moved dirt for free and they didn't even know. So to you, what's the value? What's the value of a topo to you?
For me, it's giving clients clarity on the amount of work they're doing, basically. Like I said, a lot of people just move dirt, and they're thinking they're moving 20,000 yards, and they end up moving 30,000 yards.
And they don't know.
Yeah, and that's what our topo come in play, and we're able to provide that data showing them exact quantities of how much did they move that week or that month or that pay period.
Yeah.
So I mean, for topo, it gives good clarity to the clients.
Why do you think it pays for itself, though?
I mean, like we said, if you move 20,000 yards that were not in the contract, you just save the client quite a bit of money. So our topo range.
Through a change order.
Correct.
Through a change order.
And we have the data to back up the change order in case it's needed.
How often are you asked for the data when we tell the client, through the report that the data is, we really don't know what they're looking at, but they'll come back and sometimes check. What do you give them to prove that?
So we'll usually the engineer will request for our topo, either an XML format or DWG or text file, whichever. But I want to say about 50% of the jobs we do, usually the engineer's going to request that because we don't get the same numbers they get. So
talk about the times where the engineer believes that we're wrong.
Man, that's every time. I don't think there's been a time where engineer comes back.
Well, I wouldn't say every time. In the past, it was like that before we built a reputation.
Yeah,
we got a good reputation.
Yeah, now the reputation backs us up, but usually they don't right away be like, oh yeah, it's our fault.
Yeah,
like, we'll take it. They'll ask for our GCPs, our pretty much everything to back up our work. Which at the end of the day, I don't think we've ever had a time where they're like, oh no, y'all wrong.
There's been some times where we have to go and pretty much have a match with
Yeah, an
with
audit.
the engineer and audit, and we'll be there on site with the engineer. We'll go to our spots that have the GCPs and stuff. Engineer will shoot their point. We'll shoot our point.
We'll just match it.
They'll verify themselves that the topo is in fact how
Correct.
accurate.
We should get within a tenth an inch, depending on obviously the size of the site,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of factors to it, grass, it's a lot of things. But usually in a bare ground topo, it's within an inch.
So to wrap all that up, why does it pay for more than itself? Because you'll be able to get a change order for the amount of dirt that you would have moved for free if you didn't have an accurate topo to be able to prove what the actual conditions of the site are.
Correct. Yeah, because you have the data to back it up.
So the pre-construction package that we offer, not even the package, but the typical package that we offer people is a 3D model, a drone topo, and a takeoff. 75% of the people that get a model, they get a topo too. It doesn't hurt. A topo is around $1,000, unless it's a massive site. But typically these 20-acre sites, we do drone topo for about $1,000. And for $1,000, you could possibly make $100,000 or more off of a change order. I'd like to just call it, dirt insurance, contract insurance. So the package, we call it the trio, and it provides a clean cut and fill report, an aerial, and sometimes we can cut up to certain areas like the pond. We'll take the pond, figure out the quantities of the pond. You figure out the quantities of the streets, the right-of-ways, whatever the client wants. We will create a boundary, we call it bounded volumes, of the quantities that are on the site. We can deliver unlimited formats. Whatever format is needed, the format will be delivered.
When should topos be done? Usually our clients, they will request a topo for a number of reasons, such as bidding, progress topos, initial takeoffs, or usually just volume, sometimes when they want to calculate stockpiles and stuff like that. But usually the most important topo will always be the pre-construction topo.
Yep.
That will be the most important, and usually we always go back to that one. That will always be our number one topo. The rest will just be progress, just to make sure how much dirt, and they're still tracking the payroll and stuff like that. But
yeah, so if you are doing progress reports, you got to have the pre-con topo.
correct, yeah, because we always go back to that initially, in case there are, like I say, a discrepancy in dirt, or let's say within this progress topo to the next progress topo, somebody came and placed some dirt on their side that they were not supposed to. We're able to catch that from our pre-construction topos.
So explain how you make sure that your site is not showing a change in volume due to your topo being not accurate. Because in the GPS world, our topos, everything's within a tenth.
Correct.
The common term is within a tenth.
Correct.
But how do you make sure that when you compare this report to that report, let's say no dirt has been moved, how do you prevent that? Because sometimes a report will say that you moved 100,000 yards. I'm just throwing 100,000 yards as an example, when you didn't move nothing. How could that happen?
The way we usually verify, we'll always, anytime we have a topo for a client, we'll always tie into their control set. So we'll always compare our previous topo that we did. If it's a progress topo, we'll compare it to the previous topo to the most recent topo. And anywhere we've seen that there was no change of dirt, we'll verify our surface within a tenth in that area. Obviously, GPS, like we said, is not 100% always accurate. So we got like a tenth of fluctuation we're able to handle. But usually we get rid of that with the fill factors and compactions and all that. So,
and then also like what you just mentioned, you can see the whole area. Usually we communicate with the client. We can see the areas that they're working on. Typically it's a pond, and they're progress reporting is happening on big mass field jobs.
Correct. Yeah.
Jobs that last a year or whatever.
300 acres.
And you're digging the pond and you're filling this area here. And so we will hone in the boundaries around those areas, just a pond and just this current fill area, and we won't consider any quantities anywhere else because of that, what you just mentioned. GPS, it's within a tenth.
Yeah.
And that's what the drone is using, within a tenth. And so you can hone in your quantities and exclude the areas that nothing happened on, because if you look at those areas, technically nothing has happened in those areas, but a quantity will be produced.
Yeah.
It will say, a couple thousand yards or something like that. And so for us to be real accurate, we usually go in there and just hone in on the areas that
boundary we know that there need quantities on.
Exactly. Just the scope areas of that progress report, instead of just comparing report to report and spitting out the quantity and being going, you move that. Because then you get to talk, they call you and they're like, load counts and I didn't do this, and you know, and I feel like that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we run into is people that are using load counts to
Correct.
calculate their quantities versus what they actually move because they believe that their hoe operator is
Yeah.
loading that truck up
Every time.
exactly, you know, what it needs to be loaded up to. And, you know, what about at lunchtime when all those trucks are loaded up and he's trying to get all those trucks loaded up and get out on that rotation after lunch?
Correct.
You know, little things that happen, you know, what if it's a Monday and the guy's tired or he had a long weekend and those trucks aren't being loaded? You know, let's just be real. Humans aren't perfect.
Yeah.
They're going to get pretty close, but you cannot just base your sight, you know, your true progress off of load counts.
Yeah. And that's usually what majority of our clients do, load counts.
I mean, it's a
Yeah.
form of it, but
Yeah, it's a way to keep without having us to go out there every
Yeah.
week to wait.
but if you want to do things based off of like for example, pay apps, we got some clients that,
Yeah.
and like the landfill
Monthly.
clients,
Correct.
and they, you know, they want to
Every
be
month.
exact. You know, sometimes these people that are receiving the pay app and they're the ones that are paying it out. Now they want to see some data. They don't want to just be like load counts. Like,
Yeah.
let's see something. Let's see a report, or you know, let's see some data.
Yeah, that usually for landfill we should do monthly reports on all their jobs.
So that covers about when should topos be done: pre-construction or even pre-bidding, periodic or progress reporting, and then as-builts. We didn't really talk much about as-builts,
yeah.
but
Well, there's not really much. Usually topo more like manual than actual. Maybe we use drone topo.
well, let's talk about the application of an as-built real quick. About, you know, your traditional as-built, they go out there like you said and they take shots. You know,
Correct.
you got this brake line right here, and let's use this as an example. Let's say this is where the design line is. Typically people will come out with their rover and they'll go find that, or their, you know, robot or whatever, their prism, and they're going to find that spot. Not everybody does this, but everybody knows what I'm about to say right now is they'll go and say, oh, this is the point that the design, you know, position should be. I'm going to shoot it right there. But realistically, it was missed, you know, a couple inches, and they end up shooting it below. And then they give it to the, you know, the person reporting it, and they go back and they look and they see the elevation is a lot different than what the design elevation is. But what they don't see is the fact that the grade is there. It's
Yeah.
just over a tiny bit. And so with aerial topographies, you can truly see the whole site. And we'll throw in the colors and stuff too, to where you're not looking at just one point. You're not depending on one point for that corner of the lot. Realistically, you probably have about 500 points in that area. Because with the average drone topo, you have about 1 to 3 million points on the topo.
Yeah,
So there is no misinforming of what is actually out there with a drone topo. You can truly see the whole thing, and we'll throw on the color reports, you know, the tolerances and stuff, and basically put everything. What is your tolerance? 1/10, 2/10 for mass fill or whatever. We'll put that tolerance in there, and you can see everything green that is, you know, approved.
Yeah.
Everything that it's not green, you know, it's either fill or cut, and it's a true, clear representation of what the site is, and it's not it's off. You know, it's on a punch list now. Now you could be like, no, it's not off. It's just it's an inch over, and that's acceptable. Who in their right mind would not accept a brake line being off an inch or two? So, I think that's one of the biggest benefits of an as-built. You know, when you're talking as-builts with drone topos, is you can truly see the whole site rather than just, what is it, 1 point per, you know, design grade.
Correct.
I don't think that's efficient in today's time. I think everyone should be using aerial topos for as-builting, but in combination with the hard shots like we do, you know, when we go out.
Yeah, usually for as-built, we would do our hard shots still, and we'll use our topo for more of the open spots, like we said, great breaks and stuff, high banks, stuff that are more visual
Yeah.
in the actual image of the topo.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about that as we move into that next point, processes. So what does our topo process look like? How do you make sure you're right? What does the timeline look like? You know, all that.
The timeline on the topo is going to depend a lot, obviously, on the size, the condition, what actually do we do out there. I mean, usually for pre-construction topos, there might be some grass out there, so it consists of a lot of manual shots and pretty much merging the two together. Like we said, we use LiDAR technology, which it does penetrate pretty good when it comes to tree canopy, but doesn't do great in grass pretty much. So
Grass and like
grass,
south
water,
coastline shrubs,
yeah,
and
stuff like that. I mean, stuff that are hard to penetrate, we'll do manual shots. So usually that type of topo usually takes us between 2 to 3 days, depending
yeah.
how big the site is. But on average, our topos, we usually get them done within a day. They're pretty short topos, 20 acres to 100 acres. So that's usually the time frame for a topo. Now, the processing that we do is we do both a mixture of the drone technology, and our regular handheld GPS. So we put those two together to make a topo. So we start off with usually setting our ground control points, setting that up, shooting our property corners if needed, control points.
And how do we do our ground control points?
Usually we, depending on the site, if it's going to be a site that we stay on for a long time, we usually set a permanent X, which is like a flagging that we put on the ground. Or if it's just a progress topo, we'll go out there, shoot our point, and then we'll set an X with a paint. So we'll paint out an X on the ground, a pretty big X, so we can be able to see it from our ortho.
And then you shoot that point.
Correct, and we shoot it. And then we usually, on average, per job, we set anywhere between 4 to 5 GCPs, depending if it's not too big. The bigger it is, the more GCP we set. But on average, it's 4 to 5 GCPs. And usually those are checkpoints to compare our GPS shots to the drone shots.
Explain how that's not part of our process, but it's just a secondary form of an audit. Almost, I always like to say, we're trying to prove ourselves wrong.
Correct. Yeah. So the drone that we have is an RTK drone. So technically doesn't need ground control points to make the topo itself.
To calibrate.
Yeah. Correct. So we don't. Back then we used to use photogrammetry. So those were used. The GCP were actually used to build the topo itself. Yeah. Now the drone that we have, the RTK system, is not necessary. We just use those as a form of our check and balances. So we could make sure that our GPS was written the same corrections as the drone.
Yeah.
And that's why we're able to tell, hey, did that day our GPS mess up, or possibly did the drone mess up that day?
Yeah.
And obviously, both are not going to mess up at the same time. So usually that's how we check.
That's very rare.
Yeah.
But...
I mean, possibly once in a blue moon, but
yeah.
Usually that's how we do check and balance between our drone surface and our GPS.
So that way, when we get to the stage in the project where the client, the engineer is like, no, it's wrong. Yeah. We're like, it's not. We've proved it. We've literally tried to prove it wrong. It's not wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we use our GPS. So we can be able to, because anytime they're always going to be like, hey, how did you check it? Well, I mean, grab our points, grab our surface, put them together. Do they say the same thing?
Yep. And then we can also hand over that GCP file to them as long as they hadn't touched the site.
All right.
Tell them, go shoot the points.
I mean, yeah.
Go see. You're going to come in within a tenth, you know.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to get with GPS. It's going to be within a tenth. But I like to boast in that when someone calls and says that the topo is wrong, I'm 99.9% sure that they're wrong.
Yeah. Correct.
Because we try to prove ourselves every time wrong.
Yeah, and like I said, we go through quite a bit of QAs and check and balance before we even send the product out. I said we have our processor that usually processes it, and then I'm usually the final check, making sure our points are matching within a tenth, and if they're not, we try to figure out what happened that day. Was it the signal was messing up? I mean, was it a cloudy day?
Rain? Did something affect it?
Possibly the dirt was probably too wet, and the guy probably stuck the rod down too low.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot of factors when it comes to just shooting a point. I mean, like I said, when we say we stay within a tenth, I mean, majority of the point have to stay within a tenth, but obviously not every point is going to be perfect. I mean, like we said, there's a lot of factors.
And that's why you shoot a lot of points to make sure that, some points just you trash.
Yeah, because, I mean, let's say if 5 out of 5 points you shoot, they're wrong, then obviously something's wrong. But let's say 4 points are good and 1 point just randomly is 0.15 off, then we possibly could just be the dirt probably synced a little bit or something like that.
Or the smoothing process of the processing.
Correct. Yeah, because, I mean, we usually, our surface are within a 3x3 grid. So anything could happen within those 3 feet as well.
That's right.
And, I mean, half an inch is not.
But let's be real here. The amount of risk that we're accepting, or the amount of, I don't want to say risk, but inaccuracy that we're accepting is by far way less than what you would get out of a traditional grid, 50 by 50 topo.
Correct, yeah, because they're not going to capture every grade break, every little hill, every little hole that's out there. I mean, there's so much in between that 50-foot walk than you could imagine.
Yep.
And they're not going to sit there and shoot points every 1 feet, 3 feet compared to the drone.
Well, I guess the last thing we need to talk about is just, you mentioned it before, but the deliverables. What are the common deliverables, and what can you produce?
So deliverables are, I mean, there's a variety of deliverables we do for our Topo depending on the job and obviously the client. Uh, Anywhere from an XML, DWG, DXF, PDFs, text files. I mean, there's plenty of different deliverables we
Civil
can do.
3D surfaces, exploded triangles,
Line work, break lines. I mean, you name it.
We can make a grid topo out of it. You know, some don't want all that data and they just say, give me a 50-50 grid or
some
25 by 25. Or,
correct. Someone just want to see contours, labels, see how the terrain is flowing and stuff like that. Someone just want to see color. I mean, it depends. There's
elevation reports.
correct.
For planning, you know,
For
an
custom
elevation
build.
report for a job to see, you know, I use those for when we're doing the, you know, design out in like East Texas.
Correct.
When I'm the designing, you know, person on the job, there's no engineer. It's happening in the middle of nowhere. We'll look at the site, see all the color, you know, you can really see the way that the terrain moves on that color map versus a contour map. You can see your lows and your highs, and man, it's just next level visibility for a site when you're using it on the other end of the product.
Yeah, there's a lot of deliverable when it comes to drone work. I mean, there's so many in the industry that use it, so
Yeah.
there's a lot we can do with it.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely proud of where we've come from in our topography. We went from using, you know, non-RTK photogrammetry with old school GCP calibration method, and
50 plus points at every job.
that's very uncertain right there, especially when y'all got them big jobs, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, we ended up putting like 50 GCPs on a job,
all
and
day
it's
shooting
just,
point.
and it's still just not trustworthy. You know, you'd have some times where you're looking at your point and you're trying to tie that down, and it's just floating, and it won't tie down to that point. And it's like there's some times that your hands are just tied, you can't really do much in there. Versus now, it's just it's crazy how tight that datum is with that RTK when you get it, and how true it is. So accurate that it proved our network wrong. When we're using network, we were like, man,